Good afternoon and welcome to March 10th's regular council meeting. I call the meeting to order at 1 p.m. Welcome everyone and gallery members. We have a special guest today and I will be introducing them shortly. I will now call for any added items from council before I have a removal of an item. No added items from council at this point. We will be removing item 3C, Development Permit 25022 at 4218 46th Avenue from the agenda on page 24. There was a withdrawal. Otherwise, I would like a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as presented. Are you still Deputy Mayor? No. I believe Councillor Walsh is now the Deputy Mayor. We'll just turn your sign down so I don't call you back that as Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Councillor Wilson, would you please make a motion then to adopt the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor. I make the motion that council adopt the regular and closed council meeting agenda as amended for Monday, March 10, 2025 at 1 p.m. in council chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving down to item 2, please, and this is for the previous minutes. I'm looking for consensus for February 24. Does council have any questions? We have consensus for the minutes of February 24, 2025. Moving down to item 3, delegations and presentations. And we do have, this is on page 6 of your agenda, please, item 3A. And we have our member of Parliament, MP Earl Dreeshen, who is going to have a chat with us. And I thank you very much for traveling and taking time to visit our council today.
Well, thank you very much, and indeed it's an honor for me to be here. And I was just thinking as I'm reading in the minutes about or on the agenda, as I think as most people realize that I'm not running again in the next election. I would not have been part of OLS at any rate, and that to me is something that is rather nostalgic. I do recall my foray into politics was about close to 55 years ago when I got to know Bob Clark, and who was your MLA for many years, and a dear friend of yours and of mine, and so it was nice to kind of follow in his footsteps, and I know I had some great conversations with him when the time came for the Red Deer riding to split and become Red Deer Mountain View in 2015. So I was happy to do that and be part of it. Bob had asked in his, if he could be on my board, so it's kind of exactly opposite. I had wanted to be on his 50 years ago, and then for him to be part of mine. And of course, the very first time when they knew that I was going to be running here, Myron Thompson took me under the bridge in Sundre to make sure that I knew exactly what was going on there, and so I was able to get a lot of experiences, but I also felt at home because I had taught many years and was part of Chinook's Edge School Division, and also lots of business that my wife and I had done here in Olds, and so that and being associated with, as she had taught some at Olds College, so this has really made it special for me, and but the only thing not the only thing, but one thing that I will be able to hang my hat on is that I would have been the only member of Parliament for Red Deer Mountain View. So that I'm very pleased, and of course that sort of brings it around to where we are today, and I'm happy to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I see taking place. I also will suggest to you that when the election takes place, whenever that does, that you reach out to your new member of parliament, and I know that they will feel just as welcome as I have over the years. So I'm sure that they will look forward to it, and I'm sure I know I've already told them how fortunate they are to have this community as part of their new region. A couple of 2 nights ago, there was a nomination that had taken place in Red Deer to find my replacement, and so that was completed, and so a gentleman by the name of Burton Bailey is the new candidate again for our party, and that will be the city of Red Deer, and sort of from Highway 2 over actually the river, and then cutting across to Highway 2 and across 590, which is the Innisfail Road, out about 12 miles until it cuts down and then takes in the rest of the county of Red Deer. So that becomes the new riding of Red Deer, and I have seen the new boundaries, and we have talked about the new boundaries that you have. I'm sure that there will be ways of connecting and making sure that you are well represented as well. So I'm pleased with that. Just a couple of things, and of course over the years I've had quite a few different opportunities to be engaged in different things, and I believe my years as a farmer and my years as an educator, was on a hospital board for a number of years, and many other volunteer positions prior to my being engaged in politics. But I was very fortunate to be on some very high profile committees over the years, and one that I cared a lot about was Aboriginal Affairs, as it was called at that time. It changes quite regularly, and also public accounts. So recognizing how the money is spent and what needs to happen in that regard. Health committee, agriculture a couple of times, and then international trade, industry, science and technology, environment, and at the present time still part of the Natural Resources Committee. So I've been very fortunate. I've had this opportunity to travel the world to speak on behalf of our nation with regards to food security, energy security, and security of people, in various regions, and that has been something that is very special. As I mentioned to the last year that I was teaching, I had no idea that I would end up doing this, but because the candidate that I replaced was actually going to be the nominee for the next election in 2008 or 9, whenever it was going to take place. I said I wanted to do 2 things when I started my last year of teaching. I wanted to be able to grease my combine in the daylight, and that I wanted to find something interesting and exciting to do as well. And I got about 6 days. I never did get back to greasing the combine, but I did get about 6 days from the time I retired until they called the election. But it has been interesting, and it has been exciting, and for that I thank the people of the communities in central Alberta that allowed me to have this honor. So that's kind of where I'm at this point in time. Some things that are of interest and concern, and should be, are the issues on trade at this point in time, and I believe that when we look at it, you're going to hear a lot of different things thrown out at you, and I think it's important to know the context in which some of these things take place. We do have a free trade agreement, and that basically sets the rules for the way in which products are either tariffed or move across the border. So that is significant. And of course, the arguments as to why it happens to be in jeopardy at this point in time, we all have our positions as to why that happens. But And people say, well, you have such great tariffs on all of these other products you have. Well, those are tariffs that are there when you go beyond what the agreements are. So, and yes, they seem pretty extreme when you look at them, but up until that point in time, these are things that have already been part of an agreement. And every country does the same thing for various products that they have. There's going to be a lot of concern. We talk a lot about what is happening in the U.S. Our federal government decided that in order to be in tune with the Americans, that they would put a 100% tariff on Chinese EV vehicles. The consequence of that is a 100% tariff on Canadian canola. And that has dropped the price from $14 as it was a few weeks ago, pushing $11 now, and in the fall in that $9 range, which of course is below the cost of production. So these are the sorts of things that happen. You don't know how long they're going to be in effect. You don't know whether some of these products are going to find different ways to get into different countries. I mean, that's sort of how it plays out when you have a good product and people really want it. So that's one thing that is happening right now, and so with an election looming and people having an opportunity to kind of reset and look at things differently, I think that would be important. As I say, everyone is focused on the U.S. and what is happening there, but probably to this part of the country, it's more significant the argument and the issues that we have with China at this point in time. So those are the kind of the highlights there, and the rest of it, we do have someone that is now the new leader of the Liberal Party. How it manifests itself so that they end up becoming, taking over the leadership of, therefore, the country. That's, stay tuned, try to find out just how that is going to work. But it would have to do with, dealing with the Governor General and so on. But that's just prepping itself for a federal election, and that is something that nobody really knows when it might happen. Excuse me. It's possible that it could happen within the next week that the call is made, and if that's the situation, then probably the latter part of April would be when one could anticipate an election. It is, if we get recalled to actually do our job in Ottawa, the date for that is March 24th, and that then, so the government would have some time, excuse me, they would have some time to, put a speech from the throne, because that's what happens when you go through prorogation. So some kind of a speech from the throne, maybe throw a new budget in, decide that all of the things that we've been talking about, like axing the tax and building the homes and balancing the budget and stopping the crime, seems like a good idea all of a sudden. And so I think they're looking at ways to incorporate those items into the government's philosophy. But they also have money available to tell people that during an election. And as I've always tried not to be overly partisan when I come here, but that's what elections are about, and you kind of take it from there. So those are the key things that I see when we look at issues in our community. I'm here listening to you, and I'm taking a list, and if I get to the new member of parliament before you do, I'll make sure that those things that we have talked about in the past and things that you might want to present to me today are included. So I thank you. It has been an honor, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Well, we welcome your comments shared with you on an update in how it's working in the government. Thank you very much. I open any questions to council at this time. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. It's a comment more than a question, and I'd just like to thank Mr. Dreeshen for his years of service to our community, as well as I'd like to congratulate you on your retirement, and all the best wishes to you in your next phase. And hopefully that combine gets greased during the daylight hours, and there's going to be a lot of other things you'll find you can do in the daylight hours too. So congratulations and best wishes to you.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure you're not looking at seeding canola or rapeseed, right?
It is canola, that is Canadian oil, we'll see what happens in the next 3-4 weeks.
No, it grows anywhere, that's for sure.
yeah, so.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and thank you, Mr. Dreeshen, for presenting and appearing before us. You mentioned your list, and I realize you're riding off into the sunset. Congratulations on that. But as you compile your list to give to the future Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre, could you maybe just reinforce, and it was a message that was delivered at FCM in June in Calgary, and I'm sure it'll be a message delivered at the upcoming FCM. The municipalities throughout Canada desperately need a new physical growth framework, a new revenue sharing agreement. I'm sure you're well aware of all the challenges municipalities are facing and the fact that we own and are responsible for 60% of infrastructure, yet our funding, both provincially and federally, is considerably and much less than that. So would appreciate through your transition, and once Pierre becomes the new Prime Minister, if you could echo that we desperately need a new revenue sharing agreement.
Item number 1. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any further questions? Well, I don't see any further questions at this point. Everybody, as you're aware, have probably been glued to the television sets trying to understand and figure out life. So we'll continue to stay tuned and see you in the near future.
Thank you very much. It's
I
been
would-
an honor.
It's been an honor for us as well to have you. Take care.
Okay, all the best.
Thank you. Motion, please, to accept. Thank you, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that Mr. Dreeshen be thanked very much for attending our meeting today, and I too would like to reiterate and thank you very much for your service to our community and our surrounding area. It's much appreciated. Best wishes in future endeavors.
We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Blatz. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. I guess we could say tally-o. Thank you. All right, Council, let's move down to item 3B, please. That's page 7 of your agenda, Infrastructure and Planning Quarterly Report. Is that Director Pedro? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Oops, there we go. Perfect. All right, so I'll be happy to guide you through our Q1 report. I will note that Q1 in this sense is for January and February, just given the way that the timing worked out. So we will jump to our utilities summary. So as noted, it's been relatively quiet with the exception of 3 water leaks that we've completed. 2 were on the water main itself, and 1 was on a water service. As of last week, we did have an additional one, so this really is 4 for Q1. And then we did also complete our CCTV inspections. That's being done by a contractor. At this point, we are just waiting for them to process and produce the footage and reports for us. And now moving on to, I appreciate this is quite small on the screen here, but make this a little bit larger. So what we've done is we've exported some data from our citywide system. So as we move forward, we are utilizing the system quite a bit more. And so what we've done here is we've exported all of the different work order types that we've completed in Q1. And as council can see, there's quite a lengthy list of different types of work that we do. We are showing how many of each work order type was completed for the quarter, totaling about 206. And we are showing what the labor costs and labor hours are for those work orders. So just expanding our understanding of what it takes to complete a task as a big part of that process. As we move forward with this, there will be more information included here, such as equipment utilization and costing as well. And we are working towards including fuel costing and equipment as well, just understanding what that looks like for us. All right, moving on to water loss and I&I. So we are showing just a summary for 2024 on the last Q4 report. We didn't have December in there, so I did want to give council an understanding of what December looked like. Now, overall, in 2024, the last 4 months, there was a downward trend in both water and wastewater. So it does show that what we're doing is working in some sense. Now moving on to 2025, we've seen an unfortunate increase in January. So we've jumped from approximately 12.6% on the water loss to about 30.4%. And then on the wastewater side, jumping from approximately 19.8% to 27%. Now, it's a difficult part of my job is to figure out why this increase. What we're seeing at this point, the data is showing that this is primarily additional leaks in the system. So those 4 leaks that we found and repaired in January and February, and beginning of March here, those would be attributing to this increase. Now, is it attributing to that entire percentage increase? No, likely not. There's still a lot of unknowns in the system that we do need to work on and trying to isolate those variables as we go. Now, that being said, we did receive some February numbers today, and at least on the total volumes for the water and wastewater, they have gone down. So we are just waiting to receive our utility billing volumes to see what our percentage losses are. So hopefully moving in the downward direction. Moving on to our water loss and I&I trends. So just alluding to that water and wastewater relationship. Now, council is likely used to seeing in all of 2024, particularly Q3 and Q4, these lines were relatively close. Now, what we're seeing in sort of the latter half of this quarter, you're starting to see the difference between those 2 lines increase. Now, that's indicative of that theory that there are more water leaks. So not all water usage goes into the sanitary sewer. We understand that. However, we do like to see these 2 lines relatively close. If they're not close, like they are starting to diverge in mid-February there, and there's a bit of a spike on February 21st. It just tells us there's more going out into the system, which is not necessarily seen on the utility billing side. So another issue for us to sort out. And then more data. This time it's the Q1 wastewater volumes versus rainfall. So these are relatively consistent for much of January and partially in February, but we do see with that increase in temperature in the latter half of February that our wastewater volumes did increase. Now, what's important to understand about this relationship is that it identifies 2 things. One, that we obviously still have some sort of inflow and infiltration issue into the sanitary system, which is not surprising because we know we still have issues there. But also what we're seeing, that increase that did happen because of that melt is actually a lower increase than we've seen in previous years. So the work that we've done there has resulted in some improvement to the I&I rates. So, yeah. Moving on to Public Works. As expected, this was relatively quiet, aside from winter maintenance and pothole repairs. And of course, our regular cemetery work, interments and cremation interments there. And we are preparing for upcoming spring programs. Now, similar to the utility summary provided earlier, we have broken out all of the different work order types for the Public Works Group. There have been 247 completed, over 1,100 hours logged with those work orders as well. So that's fairly good number. They do have more hours than utilities because there is more staff in Public Works, so you would see that increase in labor hours there. So, planning and infrastructure. So a few things on the go in this department. Asset management, we are continuing with our asset reconciliation, policy and procedure development. We are continuing with the 67A Avenue design. We have received that preliminary design, and as per usual preliminary design, it does need some tweaks, so we are working towards that. And then, of course, ongoing work with the LUB and MDP updates. And getting to approval timelines and values. What we are seeing is that both development permits and building permits are trending higher than 2024. We're hoping this translates into another record-setting year. That remains to be seen, but I think we're headed in the right direction. In terms of approval timelines, I will again give our team credit here. With the development officer permits, we are seeing a 1.6 days to get that complete. And on the council side, that 20.3 days, that is skewed a little bit. So of the 3 permits that came to council in January and February, 2 of those were received prior to the Christmas break, and so it really extended out that timeline there. Now, is there room for improvement? Perhaps, but it's as I've mentioned in other quarterly updates, it's difficult depending on when we receive those permits. All right, moving on to the statistics itself. So this information feeds the graphs from the previous slide. There is obviously an increase in the number of building permits and, well, through January and February compared to 2024. Now it is skewed by, a single permit there, but still a positive direction. And on the development permit side, again, we are seeing higher development permit values in January, February of 2025 versus 2024. I will note that I know Councillor Cummings has been asking for us to show the occupancy permits granted in this information. We have not included any for Q1 because there hasn't been any closed for this quarter, but in subsequent quarters, we'll be seeing that information. So, all right, our reporter problem program. So Q1, it did see 61 submissions, a little bit higher, but that's largely due to obviously a lot of drainage issues, as can be seen. So 36%, most of those coming in during that melt period. And then road issues is always another high one for us. So whether it's, potholes or snow concerns come into that as well. So people are reporting, which is great. Health and safety. So we have had 5 incidents in Q1. It is a little higher than I would like to see. That being said, all 5 were quite minor, so there was nothing significant in either of them, but just goes to show us that we do need to improve, whether it's our processes or our actual checks before completing something through that external staff. All right, looking ahead. So we have an ambitious 2025 for us. On the utilities side, we do have hydrant inspection and flow testing booked for May of this year. So that's going to do two things for us. One, it's going to give us baseline data that we didn't necessarily have on our fire hydrant system. And then they're also going to perform inspections of those hydrants. So we're going to be able to identify if whether the hydrant itself or the valve is leaking. And we suspect a few are, so this will confirm that process. We are continuing with pump house meter installation. On the public works side, as mentioned, we are preparing for seasonal maintenance in the spring. And then we are gearing up for our Kick It to the Curb and pop-up transfer station programs. On planning and infrastructure side, we are continuing with our citywide permitting module implementation, so that's officially kicked off, and we've set a tentative rollout date for January 1st of next year. So it does take approximately 8 to 10 months to get that implemented. And of course, we are continuing on the asset management policy and procedure development side. That's summarized Q1. I would be happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you very much. We do have the asset management presentation next, so thank you for referring to that earlier in your report. Are there any questions for Director Pedro? Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Pedro. On page 18, when we're talking about our approval timelines and values, and thank you for that clarification, because I was concerned when I saw it was taking 23 days for council, and your explanation explains that for me. But my question for you is, how comparable are we to other municipalities in our area for this turnaround time? Are we comparable to permit and development permit turnaround, or are we higher or lower, or do you have that data?
It's a great question. I don't have our immediate comparables on hand. I will state from experience in other areas of the province, internally we're quite quick to have 8.3 days for processing time from the application date is, I think, fairly decent. And to have 1.6 after it's deemed complete is quite expedient.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I just don't want to see us be taking too long and losing potential development. Then we would, and I realize that we're looking at our land use bylaw as well, and some tweaks will be made there, but I just want to ensure that we're on par or better.
Councillor Daly, and then Councillor Walsh and Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And through you to either Director Pedro or maybe CAO Williams could answer this. As we've seen in the past week with what's happening on the international stage, and our colleagues in the provincial government has put out a statement talking about procurement of only Canadian goods and supplies. Has the town of Olds looked into this, and have they made a plan going forward as to changing suppliers, changing our procurement methods to align with the provincial governments?
We haven't had extensive discussions on that. I know I'll speak from the operations side specifically, a lot of our products, it's kind of a mixed bag depending on where it comes from. We certainly buy from local vendors and distributors, but yeah, I think it would take a more holistic look to determine where things come from. And it's really going to be dependent on the parts that we need, whether they're manufactured in Canada or not, which could be a little tricky.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious, your vision for a pop-up transfer station.
Great question. So we actually have a meeting this week to discuss this a bit further. There are a few options on the table. One, we could mirror what we did last year and keep it open for those 3 days, or we can modify that. I won't spoil it as to which direction we're going in, but I'd like to see the program be a little bit more efficient. So there was times last year where it was pretty slow for certain hours of the days. So just streamlining that so it's more efficient for us internally and we have better availability for the public as well. So yeah, we're not 100% finalized at this point.
Councillor Cummings, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I've heard from a few people that have questions about the ownership of the water meters, oddly enough, when it's been put on their new bill. There's some confusion, and I'm hearing people weigh in as builders, installers, and homeowners all a little confused about the process and the money and who actually physically owns the meter sort of thing. So I'm wondering, what are we doing to educate homeowners about the water meter replacement process?
Yeah, so we are looking to tweak some of our communication pieces. We had planned to modify the website, the webpage speaking to the water meter replacement program to identify that exact question. To answer everybody's question, the water meter is owned by the town. So we maintain and we own that piece of infrastructure. Everything from the meter going out to the curb stop in the lawn or the driveway, that is technically the homeowners. So, and then from the curb stop to the water main within the road, that is the town's. Hopefully that answered your question.
Good, thank you for that, and we'll move over to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the director, just a quick question. Councillor Walsh asked about the pop-up transfer station, so I'll do a little slight redirection there. The branch dump and what we operated, what the town operated last year. Can you shed any teasers there for our many viewers and listeners around what that may look like, and start time, duration time, expiration time? Thanks.
For sure. We are also having that discussion this week. The intent is to offer a similar program as we did last year. Same comment as the pop-up transfer station. There were some inefficiencies, so we're just looking to streamline those. We had many days where there was low times, and so it was inefficient for us to have a staff member sitting out there for many hours. So just looking at how we can work around that and make it more efficient for both sides.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Truly a supplemental, but a comment and not a question. I would just ask, as you go through your planning stage, the feedback I hear is if we could be somewhat flexible in the duration of that branch dump. And again, given climate change and the fact that fall maybe doesn't start until like December 20th or whatever, if we can be proactive and reactive to lengthier, pleasant fall days, as people continue with their fall cleanup, rather than a hard start and stop date of Thanksgiving as an example, and yet people continue to do their garden work for 4 or 5 weeks after. So just a comment. Thank you.
For sure, and I appreciate that comment. That's one of the many things that we have on our list. So we want to be accommodating for people, and we understand the needs in the fall. So,
Sir Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Pedro. With our sidewalk repair locations to be reviewed again in the spring, and of course, we never know when spring could start. Some of us thought it had already started until today. But with our sidewalk repairs, are they reviewed by ongoing problems that we've seen in past years, or are they reviewed by reported problem, people phoning in and saying the sidewalk needs to be replaced, or is it somebody that we've contracted to walk our sidewalks and point out places that are in dire need of repair?
it's a great question. Thank you. Historically, they've been essentially a list that's formulated based on reported problem submissions. This year, we are going to do it a little bit differently, so we are taking that list as a baseline, and then we'll be actually going out and doing inspections on the roads and sidewalks themselves. And Citywide provides us with a workflow that helps automate that, but we're just looking to improve that. So.
Thank you, and supplemental to that. So then, when we start this process, and again, too, also with our asphalt repairs and maybe our pothole repairs and street sweeping, could we do a massive engagement with the community and communication out so that people are aware when we're going to start this, so that we're not inundated with thousands of questions. Is how come we haven't started street sweeping last week? Like I had 3. And I said we won't start at least till after April, the beginning of April, but then I thought maybe I had spoken out of turn. So could we do that? It's that within your administration's purview?
For sure, that's another area where we need to improve this year, so it is on our list.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Daly and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Director Pedro. And I noticed on page 15 of your report that you mentioned talking about large asphalt repairs and pothole repairs and so forth. And that seems to be quite a hot topic when it comes to spring. And probably one of the ones that I hear the most about. They talk to me about the big pothole in front of their house, or that they have to drive through every day going to work, or what have you. And so are we having a real hard look at our conditions of our streets this year and investing some money into these repairs strategically so that we can maybe get the number down on these, or number up, I don't know how you look at it, on the condition of our streets?
Fair question. So there's multifaceted answer. So there is continual deterioration of roads, for example. So we do encourage people to submit those concerns, and it does help us with our inventory there. That said, we are similar to the sidewalk repairs. We are implementing a similar process where we'll go out, do an inspection internally, and then it'll better let us understand what locations that we are doing. Now, in terms of the repairs themselves, as Council recently approved, purchasing additional equipment to try and expand that program. So the intent there is that we would do more in-house and contract out less. So in theory, we'd have a more proactive pothole or patching program. So that's the intent of purchasing those 2 pieces of equipment. So this being the first year that we're rolling out that program, there's going to be some balancing of the type of repairs. So whether it's an IR paver patch versus traditional remove and replace method. So, but I fully expect this year we'll be a little bit more proactive there, and we'll probably do more work than we've done in previous years. That being said, the deterioration has continued, and even I've noticed out on my travels that certain roads that were fine last year are starting to show some signs of stress, so they're going to have to be dealt with this year and in the next couple of years anyway. So,
Well, that's great news. Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that we're attacking it head on. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a quick question to go back to street sweeping. And our plan will be to utilize one contractor and one in-house street sweeping machine. Is that correct? And starting sometime, as Councillor Blatt said, early April?
that is correct, yes. So we do have additional funding for the contracted sweeper. We anticipate that's going to give us another week to 2 weeks, depending on if they bring in 1 or 2 sweepers at a time. But yes, the intent would be to do both, our own and the contractor, and April is the tentative start date for that.
Very good. I believe we've asked you quite a few questions for your infrastructure quarterly report. I'd ask for a motion. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council accepts the infrastructure service quarterly report as presented for information.
Very good. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. We'll move on now to asset management presentation, page 35, item 3D. And I believe that would be you, Director Pedro. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you again. So we wanted to provide council with a larger view of our asset management program. I know I briefly mentioned it in the quarterly reports. However, it is such a large scale of what we do. It does deserve its own spotlight here. And so we've just jumped through a few slides, and then I'll give council a physical demo of our citywide program. All right. So our asset management program is essentially split out into these 5 categories. And now, unfortunately, we're doing all 5 categories at once, which does require quite a few resources, but we are getting there as a team. So first is the initial data collection and integration of assets. So the town does have a listing of assets. That listing does need a lot of work. So whether it's assets that are in there, but they're not necessarily tied to the right locations, or they're not in the system entirely, there's a bit of a range of issues with the data. So that is crucially important, because without that data being accurate, everything else follows suit. So we need to spend a lot of time there, and we are doing that as a team, and we're moving forward on that. Roads and sidewalks are a big part of that. Water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, those are what we would identify as critical assets. Without having those 100% in the system, it does affect other things. And then municipal buildings, facilities, fleet and heavy equipment, and then parks and trails and recreational amenities, those are sort of the second group of assets that we'll be working on. And we are working on some, but the primary focus is roads and sidewalks, and then the underground infrastructure. Now, as I alluded to in the quarterly report, policies and procedures are in development. So 3 that we have going right now are the contributed assets procedure, and that is going to outline how we handle receiving an asset. So whether it be an FAC of a new road, let's take, Williams Avenue, for example, just creating a procedure so that we understand what it looks like when we take in that particular asset. Historically, there's been a separation between what happens when a development is done versus what, say, the finance department does. So we need to get everyone on the same page, hence this procedure. Similar procedure for new and disposed assets. So a good example here is something like purchase of a new truck. Historically, budget gets approved, respective departments work towards on the procurement side of things, and then we eventually get delivery of that truck, and then it makes its way into the TCA for under fleet. Now, this is sort of a very segmented procedure at this point, so we need to clean that up. So when we do receive a new piece of equipment, for example, we understand who's assigning unit numbers, what is the costing, is the correct asset being created in the system, is it then linked to the maintenance side of the system to actually get put in use. So lots of nuance there. And then the third one we have ongoing is the asset management policy. Now, this is an overarching policy for the entire asset management program itself. It is quite robust, and it will eventually replace our existing TCA policy, for example, but it's just outlining exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it for the asset management program. So council will have quite a bit of involvement in that one in particular, and hoping that that comes to council, I'm going to say in Q2. But it does define how we're doing things, so it's critically important. And on the data collection and integration side of things, this gets back to council's question about inspections or condition assessments. That hasn't been done very much in the past, so working towards building that structure and that workflow in the system. GIS mapping and digital asset tracking, spending a lot of time in GIS cleaning up all of those layers. Of course, the town did have a previous GIS provider, we've exported that data, and now we're actually cleaning up that data. So it was far from ideal. So we're spending a lot of time cleaning that up and building it for what we need it for. And then, of course, linking all of the financial and operational data. And so that's a back-end GIS process that we are implementing. And implementation of citywide software. So that gets into what the demo, but essentially it's fleet and equipment resources, preventative maintenance schedules, equipment vendor labor costing, as I demonstrated in the Q1 report. Route patrol is another function, so that will allow us to actually conduct the inspections, as I referenced earlier, and then process automation of all of that to make it very efficient for our team to work in that environment. And then the GIS data correction and reconciliation, as I alluded to earlier, quite a few things we have ongoing there. All right, so that in a nutshell is what we're doing. It takes a small army, and I think we're getting there. Now that brings us to some challenges and opportunities. So current challenges that we're up against, the series of poor decisions in the past causing problems today, and I won't get into the litany of issues that we're facing there, but ultimately, and I've seen this in a few different municipalities now, it's not uncommon to see siloed decision making, and so we want to get away from that, and so everybody's on the same page. If we do make a decision, we understand how that impacts other departments and impacts that piece of asset and the long-term life cycle of that. And so just merging that all is sort of step number one. Lots of data gaps and accuracy. So we're seeing that both on the existing asset inventory and on the GIS data. That needs to be cleaned up because, as I mentioned, and as I'll show you in the demo, that does affect all of our downstream decisions. Budget constraints and funding strategies, that of course plagues every municipality. There is literally not enough money that we can throw at whether it's road repairs or replacements or underground, so that will always be a challenge. Lack of a comprehensive asset management program and strategy, that's what we're working towards now. And then of course aging infrastructure. Now, some opportunities. Enhancing preventative maintenance opportunities. So this is a big one. So we want to get from reactive to proactive, and that's going to really affect our assets. So we're working towards that right now. The software does provide us with that functional capability in building out those processes, but if we don't understand what we're trying to achieve, it's hard to implement that. So we're really examining our level of service for whether it's roads, sidewalks, underground, fleet and equipment is another big one. So lots of room there. And then strengthening long-term capital planning. So the more robust your asset management program, the more data that you have in there, the easier it will be to make decisions. So what we've planned for, and this is fairly optimistic, but towards the end of the year, we would like to have a better understanding of what our long-term capital planning is going to look like. So what's the next 5 years look like for our road replacements, sidewalks, curb and gutter, water, storm, sanitary, all of those critical assets, as I mentioned earlier. That's our goal for the end of this year. And then in subsequent years, we'll start building that for other assets like facilities or parks and playgrounds, etc. And then optimizing workflow processes. That is just using the system to make things easier for everyone to operate in there. Okay, a quick little intro into Citywide. What is Citywide? It's an asset management and operations software to efficiently manage infrastructure. A few main tools in there, and I've summarized them, but asset inventory and mapping, that essentially gets into the asset management and the GIS systems, and then condition and risk assessments. We need to understand what the health is of our assets, and then we can prioritize those. capital planning and budgeting, the system does have the ability to forecast long-term investment needs, so there's where a lot of our capital planning reports will come from, or where we'll extract that information and produce those reports. And work orders and service requests, so work orders being what our staff are doing every day, logging that information, and then the service requests being, of course, the reporter problem platform that the public uses. And then the big one is the GIS integration as well. So just linking all of that data with the actual assets in the system. All right, I will just jump to the citywide portal. Perfect. All right. Yeah, there's a lot of buttons. It is quite a robust system. We will not be going through each section. I will focus on the three sections, one being the assets, the other maintenance, and then the GIS portion of this. I will say that we're not utilizing the system fully yet, so some of the information that I show you sort of will be future items, but I think it would be good to go over nonetheless. So the first one, as I mentioned, it would be the asset side. Now, and there's lots of functionality within each of the modules, but our asset inventory. So this is the heart of the system, and I can't stress this enough. So this is a listing of all of the town's assets, whether it be, in this case, water network or land, fleet, equipment, etc. It's all listed in here. There we go. So at this point, the town has 15,251 assets. That number will be changing as we reconcile this with some of our actuals and some of the GIS data. But nonetheless, lots of information that you can see within this screen, and pull that information from the assets. So we can obviously segment this based on the categories. So this is just an idea of how we've broken down all of the assets. So, audio visual, compressors, doors, electricals, fencing. The big ones are the critical assets. So for example, water network, breaking those categories down, and then road network is another large one. Approximately it's almost 1,700 road assets in there, and then we break that down even further. So category would be your overarching system, and then we break that down into, in this case, boulevards, cul-de-sacs, curb and gutter, laneway, swales, etc. Now I will show council one asset, 15. So when we dive into a particular asset, we see lots of information. So a quick little overview of what the historical costs are and what replacement costs are, estimated useful life, those types of things, and then we get into our condition and risk assessments. Now, one thing to note, all of the condition or risk assessments in the system currently are just based on the age. So we haven't yet gone through and actually completed assessments of each asset. So tying into what we're doing with the roads and sidewalks, once we do a physical assessment, we'll incorporate that into the system. And then that's actually going to change the service life and or replacement cost of that asset. So we're going to account for things like overlays or any sort of improvements or deterioration that has happened to that particular asset that isn't reflected currently. So a lot of this information will change as we input more and more data, but this is where it will all show up as a summary. We do see that map showing where that location of that asset is, And then on the left side, we get quite a bit more granular with the information, and I won't go through line by line, but summary of just the different asset details. In this case, gets into the GIS coordinates and back-end items. And we identify things like GL numbers, material types, financial information. And then we get into amortization schedule for that particular asset. So this is all predefined on the back end. And we can see for that particular asset what that amortization schedule looks like. And then here's where we would actually add any sort of additions, disposals, partial disposals. There are none for this particular asset, but if there was, we'd log them here, and that actually affects our summary as shown before. And then moving down, getting into the profile. So the profile is where we build different configurations for each asset. So for example, this particular asset, this is a paved ACP profile. This is where we're going to define service life for it and how certain things affect that asset going forward. So in the back-end profile, we can identify, okay, if we had this addition, this is how it's going to affect the amortization or the life of that particular asset. And so we would build that all in the back end. And we get into things like replacement costs, actual conditions. So as I mentioned earlier, conditions right now are just based on age base, which you can see here. So based on the in-service date of this particular asset, it's rating it as a 30, which is poor, just based on the timeline for that. And then we get into things such as risk assessments, which we haven't done a lot of data gathering for this yet. This is sort of on phase 2 of what we're trying to do. And then we can get into strategies. So this is an interesting one. So for each asset in the system, it's just going to actually project what that condition is going to be. Now, because we haven't actually done any sort of additions or improvements to this, it's just going to do a straight line all the way down. So when it was installed in 2010, all the way down to its 20-year service life. Now, that needs a lot of cleaning up, but that's what the system is tracking based on the data input. And then we get into a few other things. Now, I did want to show council this maintenance section. So this ties into our day-to-day operations. So what we do on the maintenance side, this is where we will track every event that happens for that asset from the maintenance side. So in this case, there's no work orders that have been done on that asset, but there has been 2 service requests. So just building up that history on what's happened in that area, it's all going to be centrally located in the system. So in this case, this was Ash Street. This is when we had a few service requests to various parts of Ash Street. And so once that service request comes in, we will attach the asset to that service request, and then it automatically gets attached here. And so 10 years down the line, if we are looking at identifying which areas had the most service requests, for example, we just export that information from the system, and then it gives us a direction on where to go based on those reported problems, for example. And then lots of other fun stuff, such as inspections or tracking the out of service or downtime. This would be more applicable to fleet, and any sort of failures, usage, fuel costs, and so on. So quite a lot on the asset side, and we have quite a ways to go with the data collection and the inputs here. But I think we're getting there. Now, just wanted to share a few reports with council. The system has...
Pedro, we have a question from our CAO.
Yes. Sure. So their system has a plethora of reporting options. Now, asset management, I will show council a few just to see what that looks like. So assuming we had all of our data in the system, we could export something that looks quite nice. I will show council something that doesn't look very nice right now, but well, bar chart was more interesting for this exercise. So we're going to go 2025. So this is going to run a report of what our yearly needs are for our capital replacement program. This is going to be based on the information that's currently in the assets themselves. And one moment. Here we go. So nice and colorful for us. So this is a quick snapshot of what the needs are every year. 2070 looks quite horrendous. There are approximately $30 million worth of sanitary required or projected to be required at that time. So this is just a quick way we can see, based on the information entered into each asset, where it shakes out on the capital plan. Now, I think there's some room to improve some of these numbers, so I wouldn't put too much faith into what's here currently, but the other report I will show you is the annual requirements. This is another interesting, we'll jump to a pie chart for the mayor here. And if I say 2025, this is a little...
Pedro, do you do singularly the inputs yourself here, or does anybody else have permission to go in and change things without your direction? Because I could see that getting scary.
No, for sure. Great question. No, it is a team. So between myself, manager of planning and infrastructure, asset management coordinator, and of course finance, we are all in here working on this data. So we're taking it step by step. There's quite a bit of work to be done, but I think we're headed in a pretty good direction. All right. So this, sorry, it's kind of jumbled on this monitor, but as you can see, for 2025, based on what we have in the system, we need about $8 million worth of replacement funds. So it's certainly not pretty financially. All right. Now, before I move on to the maintenance side of things, any questions?
I just wanted to jump in quickly with something I could have started with, but the rationale to why Adrian's giving you this invigorating presentation. Because you're going to see another one soon enough in 2025 with corporate services. If you recall, council in the last few years budgeted things like budgeting software, accounts payable modules, purchase order modules. Relating to council's, let's say, strategic plan, goal number 2 relates to sound governance practices. Goal number 4 relates to making informed fiscal decisions and fiscal governance. This is all about building that data set and that history, that institutional knowledge that we haven't had previously, so that the decisions that you are making with information from us is built on a solid knowledge base. Second off, coming down to short-term fiscal needs, the more information we can have and people participating in building the information, and the way in which we allow people to participate, which is through largely this system, which is also a electronic app form on people's smartphone or iPad or computer. It allows us to get or to stay leaner longer from a staffing perspective as well. People in the field focusing their efforts, tracking their time and efforts in a more efficient manner, it benefits all of us. So you're going to see another one of these presentations, and if nothing else, I want to make sure council understands that you bought us a lot of shiny toys the last few years, that we are making good use of these shiny toys. And it's investment well worth it. It's just investment that takes a lot of work and time to see the full, true value of. And Adrian, you can finish up there. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
A question from Councillor Platts. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So jumping into the maintenance side of the program, this is where we log and review all of the reported problems that come in, and as well as our work orders or preventative maintenance that happens on all of our assets. As with other modules in here, there's a lot of features and functionality. I will focus on the service requests and work order side. So when somebody does submit something online, this is where it generates itself into the system. So on my screen, I'm built to see everything. So I'm seeing all of the service requests or reported problems that have ever been entered into the system. So as of July 1st, we have 295, for example. And this is a quick snapshot of all of the ones that have come in. This is customizable on what information that you want to see, but we see their customer name, what their address are. It does show us whether it was approved, closed, different varying statuses here, and it does show us that it was linked to a work order. So what happens on the back end when a service request is created, there is depending on department, it varies. There would be a person who's designated to review that service request. Assuming that it is a legitimate issue, it gets approved and there's a work order that gets created for it, and it's tied back to that service request. And so that's why we'll see work orders here in that same screen. I will show council this one. So this was, oops. This is what it looks like for us after a user submits a request. Their concern will get submitted within the notes section. And in this case, it was an apparent sinkhole in a back alley. And they've attached a file of that. So we see that file here on the left side. And then it gets into the actual asset side of that service request. So we log that customer information, we log that property in the system because we have all the properties on the back end. And then here's where we will see that particular work order that was created for that service request. So the nice thing about the system is that throughout that entire process, it's all linked. So the moment we get that service request, we understand what the needs are. We see the work order getting created. Once that work order gets created and staff goes out and whether it takes a look or does whatever remedial action is required, it'll get completed, that work order, which will then complete the service request. So it really closes the loop on that entire process there. And we can see all of that stuff and report on what's happened there. So it's very handy for us. Now, jumping to the work order side of things, similar to the service request screen, lots of information that we can see at a quick glance there. I will show council 3616. This is a good example of a work order. So in this case, this was a utility dig that we performed on Ash Street a couple weeks ago. Lots of information that we can see here on the left side. Similar to the assets, there are a lot of different features here. So we can, what our staff is very good at doing is actually putting in notes of what they're doing. So instead of handwriting something, they put it into the system and it's attached to the work order. We see all that information there. We can attach any sort of files. Staff has been really good at attaching photos or any sort of documents that we receive. In this case, I can see that we've attached the invoice from the contractor that we used. So just centralizing all of that information to that particular work order. Here we could see, and it's not attached, but this is where we would go in and physically attach Ash Street as an asset. And so we haven't quite finalized this link yet, but I would go, or this user would go in here they'd attach Ash Street, and then it would start building that history and all the work orders that were done on Ash Street. And then here's where we would assign what workers were on that work order. And the nice part about the equipment side of things is that we actually have started attaching all the equipment that was used for that particular work. So, and then further to that, this is where we would actually do our costing. So staff would go in through the mobile app and they would actually log their time. So as we can see here, there was 16 entries. Every day they would sort of check in, do the checkouts, they would enter their hours, put in a description, and the system would automatically calculate, which I'll show council in a moment, automatically calculate how much that cost us based on the position wage there. So fairly handy, and we do have staff tracking overtime hours as well, and just so that we can at the end of the year understand what overtime happened in what work versus what was during regular hours. And on the costing side, it does take all of that data and it does generate the actual cost for things. And so if we look at this particular work order, we see that 73 hours were spent on this project, and it cost the town approximately $1,700 worth of labor. Now, once there's a bit of a back-end issue with the equipment, it should do the same thing with the equipment as well. And then on the vendor contractor side, just logging that particular contract cost. So we see that contractor cost was about $11,600. So in total, without the equipment being costed, we're at just over $13,300 for the cost of this particular repair. Now this is invaluable information, especially from my perspective. It's a lot easier to pull information and make service level decisions when we're able to pull this information and for us to relay to council, hey, this dig costed us X amount of dollars and took us however many hours, right? So I really appreciate the functionality of the system and how keen our staff have been in using this. And we're just expanding what we're doing in here, essentially on a weekly basis. So it's only going to get better for us. All right. Other neat little thing on the maintenance side is this little dashboard function. Now, I'm encouraging most staff to use this. This would be particularly helpful for supervisors and managers and directors. But it's a quick snapshot that they can see of their respective departments. Now, I can see everything as the admin in here, but it's a quick snapshot of how many work orders are outstanding, for example. How many service requests are still open? What is the average completion for a service request? So just tying it back to some of those KPI metrics that we'll figure out in respective business plans. Tracking things like how many service requests this year compared to last year. This number is a little skewed because we didn't have the system in use for the first half of the year. Or looking at things such as completion times, and it'll actually break it down per work order type. So just tracking that, and then getting into work orders, just understanding how many were coming in for each month, and what's completed, what's outstanding. So it's a very quick way for a supervisor to see exactly what's going on within their department. And I will just jump through this really quickly. There is also a reporting functionality built into here, very much similar to the asset management reports. So we can report on literally anything that gets done in the system. In this case, I will show council what a work order report looks like. So how I would generate the spreadsheet and information I showed you in Q1, I would go and generate a costing report. In this case, I will isolate it to operations. there's quite a few options of what you can pull in terms of data, but I, for example, just pulled the cemetery, public works, and utilities, and this information here is all of the work orders that were ever done for those three departments. And so it's a quick way to pull what the work orders were, labor costs, hours, equipment costs, parts and materials, etc. As you can see, there's a lot of missing information here because we're not quite there in terms of tracking parts and materials, for example, but we will get there. But it's a quick snapshot of what we've done in the system, and all of this is exportable to a CSV to manipulate as needed. All right. Now I will jump into GIS, but I wanted to pause there if there's any questions on the maintenance side.
Yes, I have Councillor Blatz and Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Pedro. This is a terrific tool for you, for your staff. And a comment and a question. So obviously we need to encourage our residents to use Report a Problem, because that will be the best mechanism we have for tracking situations that we have. And assuming then we will do a full-scale engagement so people are aware. And how long does it take to do all this input, this data, and do you have enough resources to do so? Kind of piggybacking onto what Mayor Dahl had said.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. So as far as the Report a Problem piece, absolutely, we should be putting everything through there. What we've started doing, even if we receive a call, for example, if the front office receives a call, they'll actually put it through the system. So it's all tracked, it's all centralized. So we are starting to do that. As far as resourcing, I'll be honest and say that there's probably never enough resources. Now, that being said, asset management is a journey, so none of this is going to happen overnight. So it's a matter of putting in place the actual mechanisms or software that you need to do it, and then building out those policies and procedures, and just building that over time. If I wouldn't be averse to having, one more additional staff, for example, but I wouldn't put that out there because we can stagger our needs.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Daly and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Pedro. I was just noticing on some of your work orders and reports and so forth, for instance, the last one for the cemetery, I think there was logged 141 hours there, and your labor costs were like $1,200 and some dollars. How are you calculating labor on this? Is it the actual wage cost, or is there an actual industry standard that you're using for that?
Yep, great question. Fair point. I'll jump back to that actually. No. So those are actually position ranges. So we haven't actually entered specific staff salaries per person. So what we've done is we've averaged out all of the operator one positions, for example, and then used that average in the calculations. So we're not necessarily singling out a particular position. As far as the hours question, correct. The hours are a little low. We've only started logging hours since October, and so there's a lot of hours missing in this data. So when I do report to council on it, I clean that up a bit. So, yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the Director, two related questions. One is, so if we can consider continuing on with the current kind of operating envelope of staff and everything, how long before the system is fully integrated, fully stabilized, fully robust? And along those same lines, we get to the budgeting cycle in October, November, December with the new council. Will there be information available to start to shape the budget and service levels and so on? Like, it looks like we've got a great start so far. So,
Yeah, the goal is the end of the year. So come next budget cycle, we're hoping to use a lot of this data for the critical assets, so for roads, sidewalks, sanitary, storm, and water. Yeah, outside of that, it's not quite there yet, but we figure by the end of this year, that's reasonable for us.
Daly?
Councillor Wilson got both questions answered? Okay. Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And through you to Director Pedro, I just noticed on the main menu there was also a tab for permits. Now, we just came back from the Leaders Caucus up at the Alberta Munis, and the provincial government, of course, were talking about their speediness and their efficiency of issuing permits. Is this going to be part and parcel of a self-directed permit program, or are we, because that was part and parcel of their system that they introduced as well, that it's all online and you self-apply, and if you don't hear back from them from 90 days, then you assume it's accepted and you move forward with your project? Yeah, so I was just wondering, are we headed in that direction as far as a self-administered permitting process as well?
So I'll kind of split the answer there. So the permitting module is what we are currently implementing on the back end. So that is what we're looking at rolling out beginning of next year, if not end of this year. In terms of this auto approval, that's not the intent at this point. Now that being said, with the permitting module, it will all be online. So any sort of end user, developer, resident, etc., they'll log into the website, they'll have their own profile, they'll be able to submit subdivision, building permit, development permit applications through there. They'll be able to log, okay, where is it at in the approval process? We'll provide them feedback on their application, they'll see it in their portal, so outstanding information they need to provide, etc. It'll all be automated in that sense. But, yeah.
Thank you.
And just to jump on what Councillor Daly just mentioned, when Minister McIver spoke last week, he said something a bit more alarming, that speaking of what I believe was a future MGA amendment, was that if there is a permitted use that does not require things like variances, it meets all the rules, there's an expectation of a 24-hour turnaround. So anecdotally speaking, you see some of the pushback some development gets that's permitted uses on properly zoned land right now. So the province on one hand is forcing us very heavily into a realm of efficiency in our planning. On the other hand, has not quite given us the tools to make it more efficient, whether that be obviously financial support, but outdated regulation being the primary one. So we'll see what the minister comments foreshadowed, I guess, in the summer or fall, but the room went a little silent when he said that. So,
Okay, you finished the tail end of your report?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll jump quickly into the GIS, which allows us to visualize everything we're talking about here. And so one thing to note about our GIS system, it's sort of three components. One is this internal citywide GIS map. This is really tied to the assets side of what we do. There is also, of course, our public GIS portal, which is not what we're seeing here. And then there is sort of the back-end brains of the entire GIS platform, which is our QGIS system. And so that's how a few staff internally manage everything that you're seeing, whether it's on this citywide GIS or on the public-facing portal as well. So fairly simple GIS system here. I will show council excuse me, I have to go back here. Now this looks incredibly messy here. Lots of dots on this map here. So one of the functional pieces here is that we can actually see where all the service requests are located. So all of the dots on the map here, there's a legend, they mean different things. And so it actually shows us where those reported problems are. So it just allows us to visualize what the issues are there. We can see, just tying it back to our work order on Ash Street, we can see that there were multiple issues reported in that area. So we can do a similar thing for the work orders as well. Shows us all of the work orders that we've ever done. Looks really pretty when you zoom out. And then there's varying things we can do to filter this information. We can filter it to show all of just the critical work orders, for example, or the low priority ones. Lots of things we can do on the back end. And then, of course, we get into all of our asset layers here. I will just show council very quickly the actual water pressure system, water main system, sorry. Close this. So this is literally all the water lines within the town. There are some private lines, so the college being one of them. They're not town assets, but we do show them on the GIS, so we understand where those are, and we do have that information. And so a lot of things we can do with this data, and I will show council an interesting one. So if I want to produce a map that shows what is the projected condition of all of our water main, we can quickly, age-based condition. Oh, why is it not doing that? Here we go. Terrible example. Okay, let's go to the roads. So these are all of our roads. Let's go here. Good example. So it's all color coded. I can quickly see, based on the asset information on the back end, just visualize where all the needs are for the roads. So everything in red in this case is poor condition. Now, practically speaking, it's just basing this based on the age of those road segments. So it's not entirely accurate. Age is only one of the many variables that we would use to assess condition of something. More importantly is that the actual condition assessments, which haven't been entered into citywide yet. So assuming that we get the pavement assessment that was recently completed, for example, in here, it will change what this map looks like. But it's a quick way to visualize a lot of this information. And we can do that for any layer that we do have in the system. All right. Well, I think that I've taken up much of council's time, so I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Well, I certainly look forward to the future of the alignment of all this. It's been years and years into making. Councillor Walsh?
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. I'm thinking it's 20 years late in coming, but I really appreciate it. You know, poor decisions are usually based on poor information provided to councils and staff, usually based on poor data, so this is a great start. But being aware that garbage in means garbage out, is there a back end to this for an auditing process so that we can check what is going in and how it's being maintained? I know most financial systems have a auditing process in their back end, but I'm just curious how we can start monitoring the quality of data that gets inputted.
Good question. So that's part finance question. But in terms of auditing, yes, there is. So both on the financial side of things and also from the data entry side, we would audit it based on what our asset management policy looks like. So there'd be very specific criteria in terms of what can go in the system and what can't go in the system. So that's how we would base that information on. So, quick answer is yes. It gets a little complicated on the back end, but yes, yeah.
One more question? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And just more a comment and good point by Councillor Walsh, but I presume at the end of the day, the ultimate test, at least for some of this that is seeable, is the eyeball test, right? Like, you can put the data in, and if it tells us that, 50th Ave is in deterioration and highly in need of repair, and you go and there'll be an eyeball test to a lot of this stuff, right? Which would, in effect, be the audit itself as well.
For sure, for the assets you can visualize, absolutely. It's a little bit harder for the underground, for example, but yeah, we have a long ways to go in terms of our data improvement.
Thank you very much. I would once again say it was lengthy, but it was well worth every picture you showed us to have education in it, and look forward to the future. I'd ask for a motion, please. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move the council accepts the asset management presentation as presented for information, and it was a great report, Director Pedro. I really appreciate it.
Be exciting to see how it grows as we go on. Okay, thank you very much. Did you have something? Oh, you're good. Okay, I'll now call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. All right. We're moving now to item new business, page 42 of your agenda, and this is item 4A, Communications Marketing Plan. Who will be speaking to that, CAO?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Director Lapointe, I thought was going to be speaking to it, but I guess you're stuck with me. So. Yeah. It's all good. So this is basically just to provide council with an update on where administration is with the marketing plan. As council recalls, it was a item from the 2024 review of your strategic plan. It was brought to council for a $15,000 budget ask to facilitate largely third-party contractors and anticipated advertising purchases, and we're about ready to kick it off.
Oh, here he is.
So attached to the RFD is a several-page summary of what the marketing plan is going to look like and the strategies, topics it's going to focus on. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lapointe, who will surely give you the most tantalizing presentation on a marketing plan ever given to council before. So, Guy, what say you?
Firstly, I'd like to apologize. I'm running in here. We thought there was one more item on the agenda, actually, so.
You are correct, one got pulled, so.
Okay. My apologies again. So, good afternoon, Mayor Dahl and Council. This afternoon, administration is happy to bring forward the proposed Town of Olds Marketing Plan for Council review. You will remember that this item is featured in the Council Strategic Plan, so what is presented here today is intended to both meet this priority and set in motion the marketing plan's practical implementation over the next several months. The plan identifies 5 focus areas intended to demonstrate key attributes that make Olds unique, including its central location, Olds College, all ages living, arts, culture, and cuisine, and finally, community spirit. The plan's focus is to create compelling digital content for release on our social media channels. This will provide the most affordable and executable form for messaging while also promoting a relative broad reach and an opportunity to review the plan's success by utilizing online analytics. Finally, administration will use the new communication strategy to ensure the efficient and consistent delivery of the plan. With that, Supervisor Tollner or myself are open to any questions or comments you may have regarding the marketing plan.
Thank you very much for bringing this back to council. I'd like to ask council if you have any further questions for Director Lapointe. Thank you. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to either Director Lapointe or Jillian Tollner. No real question or anything. I just think this is a great plan. I was very impressed by reading this, and I think we're heading in the right direction. And I'm looking forward to see how this all rolls out for the future and what it'll bring to our community and to council for information and to our residents. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I also enjoy the goals and measuring of success near the end of your report. It's nice to see something like that in place where just listening to asset management, we've got something secure to look forward to for the future. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With the new marketing plan, are we anticipating another rebranding as well, or are we sticking with the recently branded
we're no, this is, it's slightly different. So the branding ties into this, and the way that we brand and talk about the town of Olds, it's, that's more the visual brand, and so how we're, putting out documents and things like this, whereas this is more of a, I guess this is also sort of a brand, but it's got more to do with the way we want people to be thinking about Olds. So it's more of, I guess you could look at it as a PR management type tool, more as something in that regard. But no, it will not be creating a new branding strategy.
Any further questions? Well, second round is a winner. So I would ask for a motion, please. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council accepts the marketing plan update as presented.
Very good. Well, we've got a future to market, so let's do it. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you for your time, and you're welcome to stay. All right, then we're going to move to page 50 of our agenda right now, item 4B, and this is the Town of Olds Municipal Policing Priorities. I would like to start out with the recommendation that we have on our request for decision. It does differ from the letter that was sent out on March 10th. So if we do approve this, I would like to make sure that it reflects the same with the motion numbers, so we're looking at the same thing all the time. Any questions in regards to this request for decision? Would you like me to explain what I mean? Okay, the letter that was sent out that's in this agenda with this states that number 1 is strictly says property crimes. And what we have in our motion is specifically property and person crimes. I recall a discussion with council in the past that we would like to keep the wording the same as what was passed in the motion. Does council agree or disagree? Councillor Cummings?
I seem to recall that conversation as well. I'm going to say the same thing then, or now that I said then. Specifically, property and person crimes includes all crime. So when you're specifically saying, the target specifically this, saying specifically everything, kind of contradicts itself. I'm not in favor of having both specifically property and persons crime, either remove the parentheses entirely or choose one or the other. Because we can't specifically specify everything, because we have in this statement. So I think the conversation led entirely to first focus on property crime, because that's seems to be rather prevalent in our town versus person crime. Doesn't exclude persons crimes, obviously. They're going to investigate and ensure all crime is targeted, but when they ask for priorities, they generally want a priority, not just, hey, reduce all crime. So either we need to be specific or just remove the parentheses all entirely and just say crime reduction.
Okay, well, the letter that was sent to our staff sergeant just stated simply property crimes. Is council in consensus with just property crimes and deleting specifically property and person crimes? Okay. Thank you. I'll delete that then, and we will just use number 1. We'll read property crimes only for the motion. And the second one is just missing the word all. Oh, it's in this one. Okay, I see. We missed it in the letter, but not number 2, so it's good. That was the only change I had. C.O. Williams, did you have any comments? Nope.
No, just that Staff Sergeant's letter is attached, so that one is probably better to go on, as that's...
I would like to go with the motion that council passes today, with number 1 being property crimes and delete specifically property and person. And then it's consistent, so we may have to just send another note to this from our letter of March 10th. Oh.
It's a draft letter.
Oh.
It'll be updated to whoever the motion reads.
Okay, good. I didn't see draft on there, so that's good. Thank you very much. It's not a draft letter, so it hasn't been sent. And thank you very much. Any further questions? If not, a motion, please. Counselor Cummings?
Thank you. I'm wondering if you'll entertain a motion that reads, that council approve the town's old municipal policing priorities for 2024, 2025, as per the letter on page 52 of our agenda package.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Marcy.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings, just to make sure if it's okay for a friendly amendment for 25, 26, it's for 25, 26, not 20.
Absolutely. Sorry, I misread that. Thank you. I will absolutely accept the friendly amendment to amend my motion to read 2025, 2026 versus 2024, 2025. I feel like I'm in kindergarten. That's hard to say.
What is on the table then is that council approve the agenda as presented in the letter that's draft to go out as is. Which means the letter on page 52 is what you're going to send, what I will send on behalf of council to Staff Sergeant. All good? And
Close
did you-
enough for government work.
So we have a motion on the floor to accept. Marcy's got that. Very good. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you for the review of this item. And now we will move to page 53. Page 53, item 4C is our procedural bylaw 2025-03, and we're asking for all readings today. We've been through this, and once again, I like to thank council and our CAO and his staff, as well as the committee that worked on this. Did you have a comment before we start?
Since we left it at the last time it was sent for legal review, and as the background shows, the majority of the amendments during legal review was more to language and grammar and flow. The only section that may look slightly different is the electronic attendance section, where a bit more flexibility was introduced to the criteria and procedure, but nothing that I would think interferes with the committee's original intention for that section. So outside of that, legal did their job, provided lots of minor edits, but agreed in principle with just about everything that was sent to them.
Thank you very much, CO Williams. The bylaw has now been fully reviewed by legal, is what we've been told. So I ask for first reading, please. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council gives first reading to the council and council committee meeting procedural bylaw 2025-03 as presented.
I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed? Did you put your hand up? Okay, thank you very much. That's carried. That's passed. Councillor Walsh, would you like to do second reading?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council give second reading to the council and council committee meeting procedural bylaw 2025-03 as presented.
I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. I'm looking for consent for third reading. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that unanimous consent is given for third and final reading of council and council committee meeting procedural bylaw 2025-03.
The motion on the floor. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. And third and final reading, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council gives third reading to the council and council committee meeting procedural bylaw 2025-01 as presented. 03.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone, for getting it to this point. We will now move down to correspondence and information, page 75 of your agenda, 5A. And we have two letters for review, if anybody wishes to speak to. But I'd like a motion on the floor for the receive for information. Councillor Cummings?
I move that the correspondence and information report ending March 10th, 2025 be received for information.
Do we have questions to the two items that are in the correspondence? They're straightforward. Thank you very much. Call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. And now, on page 80, item 6A is our CAO report. CEO Williams?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. To start with the report of problems summary for February, this is all inclusive of each department. With a total of, in 2025, 73 reports to date, trending slightly higher than this time last year, with a total of 47 for February. Not surprising. Road issues started to fall in February, but at the same time, drainage complaints started to rise in February. So that is a recurring thing this time of year, and looks like in about 12 hours we'll have the exact same spike in drainage complaints. So catch basins being cleared is always helpful. We do get to them, but with approximately 400 or so catch basins, it does take time, so any support residents are able to give when they're shoveling the driveways is appreciated. On these newly-ish revised council action items, we have a few things completed, such as I do believe I sent council, and I'm forgetting right now, I do hope, but I did have a contact with the library manager, Leslie, around her, but the board's budget actions for 2025 to bring that into balance. So I'll check my emails again, but if you didn't receive that explanation on what the board was able to do with the slightly reduced hand they were given based on holding funding at 2024 levels, I will share that again. The assessor, as requested, or tax assessor, will be coming to council March 24th to provide a presentation on the 101s of assessment, but primarily focused on the town of Olds and the inflationary impacts we've been seeing largely in our residential classes. And we are working on the RCMP presentation regarding the SCAN initiative along with the RDR MUG initiative. So we'll provide you with updates soon enough on that. Then with a couple truly verbal items, just wanted to note that if you didn't see Facebook yet today, Mayor Dahl was at our former fire hall, and we're pleased to announce that the third tenant occupying the space, effective last week, is Hope for Mountain View County Kids, a nonprofit organization that has been at work for many years in the area, doing really great work. And we're happy to have them join in tandem with Mountain View Food Bank, whose renovations are underway, expecting a spring move-in date for them, and the joint Coats for Everyone community lending shelf group that occupies most of the upstairs. So it's coming together well. There's still more work to do on the interior renovations, which those groups are taking on, but it's great that this space is becoming, this once unused, underutilized space is now becoming a hub for community service organizations in a time when demand for their services is rising. So yeah, that's all I had for my report, so please.
To add to your comment about the the presentation and photo for Mountain View Power, it was stressed very highly from the ladies that were there in support and very excited for their future for Hope for Kids, for the space, that they pretty well tripled, like they have their budget is going to almost triple from what it was, and the fundraising is going to be phenomenal. And being able to have the space was a great gift from the town and community for them to get started. So let's all wish them good luck on that, and I feel that they'll be able to meet their goals in the future. I really do. They really are ready to go. So thank you, CEO Williams. You're done? All right, a motion please to accept for information. Councillor Daly?
Thank you. I move that the Chief Administrative Officer's report be accepted for information.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. Those in favor? That's carried. And our last item before we move into close is page 83, please. This is item 7A. Council members will recall that we did have discussion through a report from our director, what's his name? Director Andrew at the last meeting, and this came up, and this is a notice of motion reflecting what we had asked for our CEO, and we have it written by Councillor Wilson in the same words that we've asked to be done. Would you like to move that motion, Councillor Wilson?
Yes.
On the bottom of your page there? On the bottom of your notice of motion? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just looking
So
at
if I could interject for one moment, unless council deems otherwise urgent or how we see notice of motions proceeding, this is just for information. And at the next regular council meeting, Councillor Wilson just giving notice right now, he will have a motion with the necessary background produced for then to debate accordingly on that motion.
Sure.
So unless council deems otherwise, I think unless Councilor Wilson wants to expand on this notice of motion, it's just him giving council notice that he is bringing forward a topic to the next agenda. No, this is just for information.
We will accept it for information then. I understand what you're saying.
I'm fine with that. Thank you for that clarification. Yes, thanks. That's fine.
Thank you. We'll see that at a future council meeting. And that's it for the regular portion of our council meeting for March 10th. We will be moving into a closed session for one item. I would like a motion to move to closed. Councillor Daly?
I move that we move into closed session at 2:57, citing, I'll have to go back up again, FOIP item number 1, FOIP 17, disclosure harmful to personal privacy, with all in attendance that's in the room now.
With regards to the public library? With regards to the public library?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, back. Thank you. Thank you. We have reconvened back to regular meeting. Welcome back. And I will call on Councillor Deputy Mayor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion that Debbie Collins be appointed to the Olds Municipal Library Board for a term of 2 years, starting March 10th, 2025, to expire October 25th, 2024, or 27 at the organizational meeting.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Walsh. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. I also thank everyone for your attendance and our gallery members, and I will adjourn the meeting at 3:01 p.m.